Welcome to Historical Secrets, where we don't just recount history, we dissect the parts few dare to touch. Tonight, imagine you are a man living in the Middle Ages. Charming, intelligent, able to silence the entire court with just a few lines of poetry. But then, when night falls, you have to sleep in the horse stable with an empty stomach and unfinished dreams. This is not a fairy tale, but the real life of medieval poets, the people who wrote love songs for the whole world, except themselves. Before we step into a world where poetry could make you famous or get you hanged, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because you won't want to miss the ending of this story. Trust me, after watching this video, you will never look at a love poem the same way again. And hey, let me know where in the world you're watching from. It's amazing to see history connect us, even across 1,000 years. When you have lived long enough to distinguish the musty smell of a torn blanket from the scent of personal disappointment, you realize that being a medieval poet is not a profession. It is a series of wrong decisions justified by rhyme. You think you are choosing art, but in reality, you are choosing to starve elegantly. Every morning, you wake up with a philosophical question. Can a person create while their stomach is performing a symphony? And somehow, you still try to sing. Because if you stop, the world goes silent and you hear the most terrible truth. No one really needs poetry in an age where bread is a luxury. The irony is that, while the nobility boast about high culture, it is people like you who carry the entire culture on their backs. They need you to sing their victories, to turn massacres into epics, and to make sorrowful ladies believe that love exists outside of novels. But when the feast ends and you beg for a place to sleep, they only give a thin smile. Some offer you a crumb of bread, others give you a moral lesson that art needs no money, only a soul. Easy to say when the speaker is sitting on a velvet chair and you are pressed against the hearth to regain feeling in your feet. You learn to live in the gap between admiration and pity. One day, they call you a genius. The next, they throw you out of the castle because their dog dislikes your voice. Every compliment in the Middle Ages has an expiration date, usually shorter than the time it takes for a loaf of bread to mold. And in that world, freelance artist only means free to die wherever you please. Yet, you keep going. Every village, every market is a potential stage. You tell stories, sing ballads, and try to smile when someone throws a turnip. At least it is a reaction. Every time an audience laughs at the right moment, you feel as if God has acknowledged you. But then, a sudden rain, an empty purse, and you return to reality. Poetry does not save you from the cold, nor is it strong enough to become a blanket. In the Middle Ages, wandering minstrels were radios that knew hunger. They spread news, rumors, and sometimes hope. They were the nomadic souls of the era, but no one paid a subscription. A good song gets you invited to a feast, but it could also get you beheaded for blasphemy. No Spotify, only the church. And the church did not like songs with choruses. You begin to understand that surviving in this profession requires more than talent. It requires thicker skin than armor. Some poets sought the nobility for patronage, becoming the king's storyteller. But behind that prestigious title lies a price. You have to praise those you despise, and praise them in lyrical verse. You must call a tyrant a hero, call war glorious, and call despair a test of God. Speak a rhyme wrong, you lose your head. Speak it right too well, you still lose your head, but because you angered the king. So, many like you choose a different path, the path of wind and dust, of freedom and risk. It is a life no one remembers, no one records, but it lays the foundation for every song that lives on. As you pass through small towns where lanterns flicker and the smell of beer mixes with wet grass, you carry not just music, you carry resistance. Every song of yours is a reminder that even in the darkest age, someone dares to dream. But dreams also need food, and when hunger begins to harmonize with you, everything becomes far more real. Some nights you must choose between keeping your instrument dry or keeping yourself alive. Some mornings you pluck strings with cracked fingers and still have to smile because the audience does not pay for despair. They pay for the illusion that someone suffers more than they do. And that is the most painful thing. Medieval artists live by selling their own suffering, wrapped in melody. You sing about love, but no one loves you. You sing about freedom, but live like a slave. Every audience leaves carrying your story, and you are left only with the echo of yourself. Yet, amidst all that gloom, there is a strange thing. You do not regret it. When the music plays, even for a few seconds, the whole world seems to listen. No feudal lords, no plague, no poverty, only sound and breath. And in that moment, you truly exist. Perhaps that is the real reward of this profession, something no one can take away, even when you have nothing left to lose. After many years of living on rhyme and humiliation, you realize that music is not just art, it is a survival weapon. A song can open the doors of a castle or shut your mouth forever. And you, who once thought all you needed was your voice and your heart, now understand that in the heart of the Middle Ages, the tongue is the most dangerous tool a person possesses. You begin to change the way you write. No more sweet love verses or fake praises. You write songs that know how to hide within metaphors. A line about a bird trapped in a golden cage seems harmless until the bishop realizes it is about him. 3 days later, you must flee the town at night. Metaphor, you learn, is not just art, but a shield for life. Every song is a test. You sing to eat, but also to challenge whether the world still has room for truth. And the answer is always the same, not really. People like to hear things that make them feel better, not things that make them think. The more you understand this, the better you survive. The more you survive, the more you forget what you once wanted to say. One evening, when mist spreads across the square, you meet a young girl, neither nobility nor a familiar audience. She stands quietly, listening to you sing, and when the song ends, she simply asks, "Do you ever sing for yourself?" That simple question leaves you speechless. You, who have told hundreds of stories, suddenly realize you have never told your own. Because in this world, who cares? A wandering poet carries no lineage, only a few strums and calloused hands. What place do you have in history? But that question stays in your mind. You begin to try writing differently. No more your great lordship, no more the moonlight on the lady's hair. You write about the smell of straw smoke, about cracked hands, about the loneliness of a minstrel hearing his own voice echo in the night. For the first time, you do not sing to survive. You sing to truly exist. Of course, it is a mistake. An honest medieval poet is no different than a deer stepping into a hunting forest. You are driven out of fairs, accused of spreading dangerous ideas merely for saying, "The poor know how to love too." A nobleman bluntly says, "Your art is too sad. I want to hear something that makes me proud, not guilty." And so you understand, even in art, freedom is a privilege you are never allowed to have. Time passes, your hair begins to gray, your voice grows hoarse, but your hands still remember every key. Now, when you pass through a town, children no longer chase you, but just look at you like a madman recounting the past. Some even say, "Those songs are old." Old? Perhaps, but only because no one listens long enough to realize they are still true. Then one day you hear that another young minstrel is becoming famous. People say he sings like you, but fresher. When you listen, you realize it is your song, with a few notes changed, a few words altered. The crowd laughs, cheers, throws flowers at him, and you, standing at the edge, smile faintly. No anger, just an emptiness, because you know everything will repeat. Even your dream is no longer yours alone. That night, you sit alone under an oak tree. Cold moon, biting wind. You take out your worn strings, but they still hum. You sing your first song again, the song about love, from when you thought the world could be changed by melody. Your voice shakes, not from fear, but from emotion. Amid the whistling wind, you realize you have lived your life to hear someone clap and forgot that the very act of singing was already a miracle. And then you laugh. Not a triumphant laugh, but the laugh of someone who finally understands that true art never goes hungry. Only the artist does. The next morning, villagers find you sitting against the tree, eyes closed, face peaceful. The lute rests in your lap, the last string still vibrating gently in the wind, as if the song has not ended. Some say you passed away in a dream. Some say you became the song. No one knows for sure. But from that day, occasionally, when the wind blows through the square, people still hear somewhere the echo of an old voice, hoarse yet beautiful, as a reminder that truth always finds its way, even if it must hide in the rhythm of verse. The Midsummer Fair was unlike any place you had ever been. It was a blend of paradise for the drunken and hell for the sober. The drums, flutes, laughter, and even the sound of vomiting behind the alehouse merged into a chaotic symphony. The scent of baked bread, sweat, and weeds created a distinctive perfume that could only be called the smell of life. Here, no one cared who you were, as long as you made them forget the cost of the next tax season. You set up your lute, tuned the strings, and began. Before long, a group gathered around you: peasants, children, a few curious vendors, and a drunken noblewoman clutching a chicken leg. You sang songs of spring, of love and wine, of things everyone knew were lies but still liked to believe. And then the miracle happened. They laughed. They sang along. A child dropped a cake, an old man clapped to the rhythm. In that moment, you thought perhaps, finally, you had found a true audience. But joy, like everything else in the Middle Ages, had a shelf life shorter than stale bread. A guard approached, his armor clanking like a death bell. "Who allowed you to perform here?" he asked, his voice just loud enough to overpower your lute. You replied with the most polite smile, "Sir, music belongs to everyone." He frowned. "No, it belongs to the Duke." And just like that, your performance was cut short by the glance of authority. You left the square, hungry and angry, swearing never to sing for the nobility again. That oath lasted exactly 3 hours. By evening, a corpulent merchant invited you to a private feast to create a romantic atmosphere. He promised payment in wine and bread, and you knew both would be empty words. Yet you accepted, because for an artist, to refuse a stage was to refuse life itself. The feast was an indigestible mix of greed and extravagance. The merchant sat at the center of the table, mouth full of roasted meat, speaking of the beauty of art while wiping grease with his sleeve. Beside him sat a group of young nobles, dressed in silk but with hollow eyes. They asked you to sing something sensual but not vulgar. An interesting request, like asking a cat to sing while performing magic. You sang. They laughed, but not because they understood the words. They laughed at you. A young noble tossed a piece of bread at you, joking, "An artist should taste their own work too." You bent down, picked up the bread, and took a bite, not out of pride, but because hunger was worse than humiliation. That night, as you stepped out of the feast, the wind blowing through dying torches, you looked up at the black sky and wondered, why do I still sing? Not for money, not for fame, for those had never belonged to you, but because silence was scarier. The next day, you returned to the fair. Another group of wandering performers had taken your spot, performing acrobatics and telling jokes about drunken priests. You coughed a laugh. Your idea had spread faster than you had. But instead of anger, you sat beside them, took out your lute, and began to accompany their performance. The crowd laughed again, larger, happier. For the first time, you felt you were no longer alone. The other minstrels welcomed you into their group. A drummer missing fingers, an actress who swore better than she acted, and a storyteller who added new details every time he repeated the same tale. Together, you roamed villages, stole apples, dodged taxes, and shared sleeping space in horse stables. You were no longer a solitary minstrel. You were part of something. Poor, suffering, but at least the music was human again. Then autumn came. The festival ended, the crowds thinned, and you received news. The church had issued a new decree. Wandering minstrels were deemed spreaders of lies and evil spirits. They banned performances in towns, burned instruments, and called it spiritual cleansing. You looked at your old lute, once your lifeline, now evidence against you. A friend in the group advised you to flee, but you could not. You had run all your life already. That night, you quietly climbed the hill where you could see the distant flames of the church burning sinful items. You began to sing. Not loud, not fierce, just enough for the wind to carry it. The song spoke of freedom, of laughter, and of those who dared to dream, even knowing their dreams would be burned. And strangely, even as smoke stung your eyes, you smiled. Because, for the first time, you sang for no one. When dawn came, the church could find you nowhere. Only the half-burned lute remained, and a few lines crudely carved into a nearby stone. Music does not belong to the king, nor to God. It belongs to those brave enough to sing. They say that sometimes on summer nights, if the wind blows just right, you can still hear a faint melody across the fields. The song of a wandering minstrel once forgotten by the world, yet able to make the world listen, if only for a moment. If Rome was built from steel and blood, Carthage was woven from fragrance, beauty, and the pride of women. The city rose from the shores of the Mediterranean, where each dawn illuminated the red sandstone walls, like a streak of lipstick on the lips of a goddess just awakened. From the perfectly rounded Phoenician harbors, thousands of ships set sail, carrying spices, glass, gold, and tales of unimaginable wealth. But what truly set Carthage apart was not its riches, but the way it challenged the entire ancient world. This was a civilization run by the hands of women. While Athens debated philosophy and regarded women as decoration, in Carthage, women sat on family councils, managed trade, and sometimes even commanded the fleet. The daughters of Carthage were taught from a young age that their wisdom was their greatest asset. They learned to calculate the value of silver, read the direction of the wind, and understand that a soft word could sometimes be stronger than a sword. Their freedom was not granted. It was negotiated, protected, and passed down through generations. At the center of the city stood the Temple of Tanit, where women acted as both priestesses and guardians of Carthage's soul. Under the light of the sacred fire, they sang ancient songs of the sea and the stars. Many Romans wrote that Carthage spoke in the voice of women, Savine, but they did not understand that it was precisely this tone that made the city immortal. During festivals, Carthage became a living painting. On marble steps, women wore purple and gold robes, their jewelry glittering like the surface of water. They offered incense, scattered flowers, and danced to the beat of drums. Greek, Roman, and Egyptian merchants paused, mesmerized by the scene, both curious and cautious. They saw in Carthage something they could not comprehend, a city both sacred and decadent, both commercial and mysterious. Yet beauty always frightened the world. As Carthage's power spread, Rome saw not just a rival, but a mirror reflecting its own weakness. In the eyes of the Romans, Carthage was a seductive but dangerous woman, a symbol to be subdued. And so the Punic Wars began. But long before Hannibal led elephants across the Alps, before the city was burned, Carthage fought with a weapon stronger than iron and steel: pride. While men went to war, women stayed behind, organized production, maintained trade, and sent letters to the gods. These letters were inscribed on clay, in rounded script. Not pleas, but reminders that they still existed. One story tells that in the final days before Carthage fell, the priestesses of Tanit gathered in the temple, dressed in red robes, without shedding a tear. They did not flee. When the Roman army broke the gates, they sang songs of the sea, the sun, and rebirth. It is said that in that moment, the wind changed direction, carrying their voices out to sea. After the city was burned, the Romans flattened the temples, sowed salt into the ground, and declared Carthage dead. But Carthage did not die. It hid in stories, in incense, in the symbols of goddesses that the Romans, ironically, later worshipped under the name Juno Celestis. They tried to erase Carthage, but inadvertently continued it. Centuries passed, and scholars looking back realized that Carthage's power did not come from its army or wealth, but from the respect given to intellect and emotion. It was a civilization where women did not need to demand power, because they had held it from the start. Today, when you look toward the coast of Tunisia, where the wind blows over the ruins of the Temple of Tanit, you can still hear a faint echo, not of war, but of prayers soft as breath. And if you listen long enough, you realize it is not weak. It is the sound of a city that was burned but never conquered. Carthage is not just a lesson in defeat, but evidence that history is not only written by the victors, it is whispered forever by those who were consumed by fire. However, to understand why Carthage, the city of merchants, warriors, and poets, trusted women with sacred power, one must step beyond Greco-Roman biases and see the world through Punic eyes. Here, women were not fragile shadows hiding behind veils, but pillars of order, keepers of balance between wealth and faith, between sun and moon. In a society where every contract was engraved on bronze or stone, their presence was living proof of Carthage's practical and steadfast spirit. These women did not merely stand behind household walls, but in the limestone halls where prayers echoed, mingling with the scent of oils and sea salt. They were recorders, measurers, negotiators. They understood the value of every drop of olive oil, every strand of flax, every ingot of silver, not theoretically, but through a survival instinct honed over generations of Punic mothers. And it was this instinct that made Carthage one of the most powerful trading empires in the Mediterranean. While the Greeks exalted ideals and the Romans worshiped discipline, Carthage revered efficiency, and its women were the living embodiment of that principle. A man could sail out with 50 ships, but if his wife could not manage the household, balance the harvest and offerings, the family would collapse. Carthage survived through transactions, but also through the hands that kept the fire burning in every home. Thus, when Greek or Roman histories described Carthage as barbaric, it was not just prejudice. It was fear of a civilization that could not comprehend women wielding power without titles. They saw the Tanit priestesses presiding over rituals, directing the people, negotiating with merchants, and it unsettled them. For in the eyes of the ancient world, a woman allowed to speak for the divine was a paradox. In Carthage, it was natural. Imagine a morning at the Carthaginian harbor, ships returning from Sicily or Numidia, loaded with grain, gold, ivory. Amid the crowd of merchants and slaves, a woman draped in a purple Tyrian cloak stands by barrels of oil, her eyes as sharp as the sea before a storm. She checks the ledgers, orders the slaves to weigh the goods, then walks away to the sound of blessings. Tanit protect. In that moment, she is not merely a merchant's wife. She is Carthage in miniature, a city that calculates, worships, and survives among rival empires. Behind this wealth lay a sacred belief. All riches must be offered to Tanit before use. Prosperity was never separated from faith. A jar of oil sold, a harvest reaped, or a child born, all tied to small rituals. Women were the soul of these ceremonies, the ones who lit incense, prayed, and decided what should be offered. Even in funerals, where the boundary between life and death was thinnest, they presided. When someone passed away, women prepared the soul's journey, anointing with oils, wrapping in linen, singing ancient hymns by flickering candlelight. For them, death was not fearsome, but part of the covenant between human and deity. For Tanit was not only the goddess of fertility, she was the keeper of the door between the world of light and shadow. Thus, in Carthage's rituals, women were both protectors of life and witnesses to death. They lived between two worlds without fear. This led Greeks to call them witches, Romans to call them heretics. But to Carthaginians, they were the heart of the city, the flame burning through wars, droughts, and storms. This power did not come from force or political authority, but from the sanctity of belief. When a Tanit priestess raised her voice in song, the entire city fell silent. As she walked across the marble steps, the scent of oils and resins spread through the air. And when she raised her hand to the sky, that was the moment Carthage connected with the cosmos. Men could bring home gold, but women were the guardians of the city's soul. In every Punic house, the fire was lit not just for meals, but with the faith that Tanit was watching. And through every prayer, every ritual, every humble gesture, Carthage was reborn each day. When Rome finally destroyed Carthage, burning the temple of Tanit and sowing salt into the land, the conquerors believed they had erased an entire civilization. But what they did not know was that they could not extinguish the faith of the women who had kept that flame alive for centuries. Among the city's ashes remained small clay statues, triangular, with round faces, arms raised. No one sang the hymns anymore, but Tanit's gaze still reached heavenward, as it had once done. For ultimately, Carthage was not merely a city, it was prayer turned to stone, a memory of a civilization where women did not obey, but govern destiny. And in every layer of ash, every shard of pottery, every wind that blows through the ancient harbor, one can still hear the whisper, Tanit watches still. From the ashes of wars, from the bronze drums sounding amid scorched walls, the women of Carthage emerged not as survivors, but as keepers of memory. When the city shook under Roman attacks, when smoke from the harbor obscured even the statue of Tanit, they still lit incense, still recorded, still kept ledgers and prayed. For in the Carthaginian mindset, faith and order were two things that could not collapse, even when the walls had fallen. In the West, Greco-Roman historians often saw Carthage only through the lens of war. Hannibal, the elephants, the burning ships. But behind that front lay a remarkably sophisticated home front, maintained by women. When men went to battle, it was they who ensured that every grain of wheat, every coin, every sail rope was in its proper place. They managed war finances, coordinated goods, and kept offerings to the gods uninterrupted. Without them, Carthage's great commercial machinery would have stopped functioning after just one season. The Greeks believed women should remain silent in the home, while the Carthaginians entrusted them with operational power. A wife was not merely a caretaker of the household, she was the brain of the enterprise. A mother did not merely give birth to warriors, she trained them through faith and discipline. In Punic culture, where every decision was linked to the divine, women became the bridge between humans and gods, between commerce and the sacred. As the empire expanded across North Africa and the Mediterranean, Carthage built vast trade networks, and women were the threads that held these routes together. They sent letters to colonies, negotiated with partners from Malta, Sardinia, or Gades. Each red wax seal bearing their mark was proof of influence extending beyond the city's borders. The Punic inscriptions written by their hands were not merely records, but declarations of order and belief. Within the temples of Tanit, the high priestesses were the political soul. They did not sit on thrones, yet their voices carried farther than any parliamentary speech. When a general sought divine blessing for a campaign, he did not consult the Senate, he consulted them. A nod from a priestess could open the gate to war or close the door to peace. Letters sent to colonies always began with blessings in Tanit's name, and it was they who composed them. It was at this intersection between economy and the divine, between marketplace and altar, that Carthaginian women established a model of power rarely seen in the ancient world. Their authority did not come from the sword, but from coordination, calculation, and sustaining faith. The Romans called it cunning. But to Carthage, it was the wisdom of Tanit, feminine intelligence that kept the city standing through centuries of upheaval. In daily life, this was manifest to almost legendary levels. A merchant's wife could light incense at the temple, inventory goods, and entertain Greek visitors with wine and philosophy all in the same morning. She knew the price of gold in Numidia, the price of oil in Sicily, and even the exchange rate of silver in Gades. To the Greeks, this was unacceptable, a woman discussing money. But to the Carthaginians, it was proof of piety. Only by properly managing the wealth granted by the gods were you worthy of more. And it was this spirit, the harmony of the spiritual and practical, that made Carthaginian women the foundation of the city. When war broke out, they transformed weaving workshops into armament production sites, offering cloth to the army and gifts to Tanit in the same morning. When the harbor was engulfed in smoke, they still managed the stores, calculated rations for civilians, and organized peace-invoking rituals. Death did not intimidate them. It was merely another phase in Tanit's cycle, where an end only opened the way to a new beginning. The Romans wrote that the women of Carthage laughed when they saw their city burn. They did not understand that it was not a laugh of despair, but of faith. For the Carthaginians, when one fire destroyed a city, another would be lit in the temple. When a sun fell, they did not lament, for they believed Tanit had called the soul home. It was this cold steadfastness that struck fear into their enemies. For Carthage was not merely a city, it was a prayer written in stone, run by commerce and kept alive by women. When the Romans sowed salt over the land of Carthage, they thought they had erased everything. Yet, in every village colony, every market and harbor, the Punic spirit lived on in the whispered prayers of wives, in the steadfast eyes of mothers. Today, few ruins of Carthage remain, but if you stand on the shores of Tunisia and listen closely, you can hear the whispers of those women in the wind. Not cries, but the rhythm of life. Counting coins, keeping ledgers, praying, weaving, and carrying on, as if the whole world were maintained by their hands. They were merchants unrecorded in chronicles, priestesses without monuments, yet the true soul of the empire. Carthage fell, but their philosophy, that true power lies in the balance between intellect and faith, between hand and heart, endures in every subsequent civilization. And perhaps that was Tanit's greatest revenge, not to conquer Rome by sword, but through immortality in human memory. The first light of dawn shone upon the stone walls of Camulodunum, and it was also the last light that the Roman city would witness in peace. The cobblestone streets, once familiar with the footsteps of officials and merchants, now echoed with the march of tens of thousands of warriors. Ahead, Boudica, the red-haired woman, ablaze like fire, rode a four-horse chariot, her cloak flying like a banner challenging an empire. In her hand was not a scepter, but the spear of Andrasta, the Celtic goddess of vengeance, And when it was raised high, the entire sky trembled with the cries of those who had once been peasants, blacksmiths, and slaves, now fighting for the honor that had been trampled. Inside Camulodunum, the Roman officials remained arrogantly confident to the point of blindness. They believed that a group of barbarians, led by a woman, could not pose a real threat. Instead of preparing defenses, they sent letters for reinforcements to Londinium, certain that legions would arrive to save them. But when the horns of the Celts sounded, their arrogance was torn apart. The first spears struck the wooden gates, the war chariots crushed the guards, and in an instant, the first Roman city in Britannia became a sea of fire. The Temple of Claudius, a symbol of imperial power, became the last stronghold. The Romans ran inside, locked the doors, and prayed to their gods. Meanwhile, the Celts surrounded it, singing the supplications of Andrasta, ancient melodies that echoed like thunder. Boudica did not order an immediate attack. She wanted them to understand the feeling of being imprisoned, scorned, and stripped of everything. 3 days later, the temple walls collapsed, and with them, Rome's power in eastern England crumbled as well. Roman historians later wrote of the massacre with horror. But to the Britons, it was justice. Justice born from blood and tears, forged in the humiliation that Boudica and her daughters had endured. Not a single stone of Camulodunum was left intact. Those who had mocked the Celts as savage now knelt in fear, watching the red-haired queen pass by. "You taught me the laws of the empire," she is said to have declared. "Now I will repay them in the language of fire." After Camulodunum, the storm named Boudica continued to rage. News reached Londinium, the new Roman commercial hub. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, busy suppressing the Druids on the Isle of Mona, was forced to march south in haste. But by the time he arrived, the city had turned to ashes. Merchants, soldiers, civilians, all swept up in the fury of the Britannic people. For the first time, Rome felt the tremor of a nation they had once considered barbaric. Boudica was not merely a queen. She was a symbol of rebellion. Other women followed her example, to step no longer victims but leaders. Ancient records describe mothers bringing their children to the battlefield, teaching them war songs while sharpening swords on anvils. On the battlefield, they shouted the names of Celtic gods, not to pray for victory, but to swear they would never bow. And the most terrifying thing for Rome was not Boudica's numbers, but the ironclad faith of her and her followers. When Paulinus finally assembled his forces, he discovered that his enemy did not fight like an army. They fought like a living flame. No formations, no tactics, only the will to survive of insulted souls. But Rome was Rome. Their discipline was steel, and steel eventually overcame the storm. At the Battle of Watling Street, Suetonius chose a narrow valley, forcing the Celts to attack head-on. Boudica's warriors, intoxicated with the euphoria of victory, surged like waves breaking on the shore, and were crushed by spears, discipline, and Roman war machines. When the smoke cleared, tens of thousands of Celts lay dead, and their queen vanished into legend. No one knows exactly what happened afterward. Some accounts claim she poisoned herself to avoid capture. Others say she was taken to become part of the sacred oak forests, where the souls of those who fought for freedom forever dwell. Whatever the truth, the Romans understood that their victory was temporary. They could conquer the land, but they could not conquer memory. Boudica became a symbol of indomitable spirit, passed down through folk songs, carved symbols on stones, and the eyes of Celtic girls listening to their mothers' tales by the campfire. In the centuries that followed, as other empires rose and fell, her name endured as a sacred warning to all invaders. Never underestimate a wronged woman. Roman historians, despite their bitter resentment, could not deny her stature. They called her femina ferox, the fierce woman. But modern history sees in Boudica something greater than brutality. It sees the will of a mother protecting her children, a queen defending her people, and a soul safeguarding honor. In hindsight, it is understood that she did not fight for power, but for justice. The ruins of Camulodunum today are merely broken stones, yet beneath the earth lie the ashes of a rebellion that shaped the history of England. Boudica failed militarily, but she triumphed in human memory. Like the Carthaginian women who sang amid the ruins, she proved that no empire, no matter how mighty, can extinguish the spirit of a woman standing for her beliefs. As dawn broke over the Watling Plains, mist mingled with smoke from distant fires. The remnants of Roman cities set ablaze. On the horizon, Boudicca's army stretched like a colossal serpent of bronze and iron, winding over the hills, war drums echoing like thunder. At the center, the queen stood on her two-horse chariot, holding the spear of Andrasta, her red hair streaming, eyes blazing not with rage, but with unwavering faith. Behind her, mothers, freed slaves, and warriors tattooed with Roman ashes all awaited the fateful moment. Opposite them, Governor Suetonius Paulinus, with 10,000 elite soldiers of the empire, formed a line in a narrow valley where only a single road led in. He did not have the numbers, but he had what the Romans always relied upon: discipline, strategy, and fear. He allowed the Celtic warriors to surge forward, like waves crashing against rocks, only to shatter. Boudicca's war chariots charged, wheels rolling over soft, wet ground, shouts echoing throughout the valley. Many believed that the goddess Andrasta would grant them victory, but the terrain betrayed them. Suetonius ordered the javelins thrown. A rain of iron descended. The leading warriors fell, horses wounded, chariots overturned, and the ranks behind trampled their own comrades. Roman soldiers advanced immediately, shields covering their bodies, pushing back each wave of assault. There was no chaos in the Roman ranks, only a silent machine of slaughter. The Celts, though vastly more numerous, could not maneuver in the cramped space. Behind them were wagons carrying families and loot, blocking any retreat. It was a fatal mistake. Boudicca watched from above, seeing disorder spread like fire against the wind. She shouted orders to reorganize, but the sound of hundreds of drums, cries of the wounded, and whinnies of horses swallowed all commands in chaos. So Suetonius executed his final move. Roman cavalry from both flanks surged forward, sweeping away the remaining ranks. The massacre unfolded so quickly that the ground was covered with bodies and armor within hours. About 80,000 Celtic warriors fell, while the Romans lost fewer than 400. Historian Tacitus later wrote, "Those who fought for freedom were killed not because they were weak, but because they believed justice was enough to prevail." But the harsh truth was far more brutal. Will alone could not overcome the discipline of steel. As the sun set, the Watling fields were no longer a battlefield. They were the graveyard of a dream. No one knows exactly what happened to Boudicca afterward. Some records say she drank poison, refusing to submit to the Romans. Others claim she fled to the forests, where druid priestesses hid her soul in an ancient ritual. Whatever the truth, it was clear that Rome did not dare celebrate. Suetonius had won, but he won at a cost that shook the entire empire. A third of Britain burned, tens of thousands dead, and the spirit of the native people forever aflame. News of Boudicca's death spread across Europe. In Rome, Emperor Nero is said to have been distraught upon hearing of the devastation in Britannia. He had even considered withdrawing all troops from the island, believing it to be cursed by the gods of the north. Yet instead of retreating, he chose to reassert control with iron and blood. Roman towns were rebuilt, this time with high walls, steel gates, and permanent garrisons. From then on, Britannia became a permanent scar on the empire's map. However, in the memory of the native people, Boudicca did not die. She became a symbol, not just a rebellious queen, but a vow. In Celtic villages, mothers told their children that when the sunrise turned red, it was because Boudicca's hair burned in the sky, lighting the way for restless souls. Her name was carved into stones, painted on walls, and whispered in prayers. Ironically, it was the Romans, those who once called her barbarian, who ensured her eternal remembrance. They feared her, yet admired her. In historical accounts, Boudicca is described as a woman whose gaze made soldiers tremble and whose words silenced the battlefield. They called her Femina Ferox, the fierce woman. But over time, the meaning of this title changed. It was no longer an insult, but a mark of courage. Today, beneath the modern streets of London, the red soil still remains, traces of the uprising archaeologists call Boudicca's horizon. Every burned shard of pottery, every broken beam bears witness to the moment when an entire people dared to challenge the world's greatest empire. And in the silence of history, one realizes that Boudicca did not truly fail. She could not defeat Rome with sword and spear, but she defeated it with memory. For 2,000 years, people have recounted her story, not as a rebel, but as a forgotten goddess of justice. When modern Britons see the bronze statue of Boudica by the Thames, where she once burned Londinium, they do not see a rebel. They see a woman who dared to say enough to the greatest empire that ever existed. In the Roman world, where all decisions were made by men, Boudica was unacceptable. And that is precisely why she became legendary. Like Joan of Arc later, or the female warriors in Norse epics, Boudica represents a faith beyond limits. A belief that justice sometimes does not come from a throne, but from the fury of a mother. And perhaps that is her true legacy. Not the burning cities, not victories or defeats, but the awakening. That even in an era choked by power, a woman could shake an empire when she stood for her beliefs. The dawn over the Dardania Valley brought not only light, but also a sense of rebirth. Mist still clung to the hills, yet sunlight pierced through every branch, highlighting the green of the meadows and the life rising from Mother Earth. The Urian tribes gathered from across the mountains, their footsteps on the dewy ground echoing like war drums, signaling a gathering that was not only a festival, but also preparation for the challenges ahead. From narrow mountain passes, groups of people appeared, men carrying spears and javelins, women holding baskets of grain, children running around sacred stone pillars, laughter mingling with cheers throughout the valley, blending with the sounds of folk instruments. Every step, every song, every drumbeat reminded them that they were not separate individuals, but a community bound by blood, ancestry, and faith in the gods. At the center of the valley stood a high altar of white stone, carved with images of the gods Depur and Prende, towering above the meadow, breaking the silence of the mountains. The most experienced, tribal leaders, battle-hardened warriors, stood around, eyes following every gesture, every movement of the festival leader. Offerings were carefully arranged: golden barley, fresh cheese, fragrant honey, even newborn lambs, symbols of fertility and prosperity. Smoke from the offerings mingled with the mist, creating a mystical haze that made anyone entering the valley feel the sacredness. Children were given small tasks, carrying mountain flowers and leaves to place around the altar, forming vibrant circles of color. Meanwhile, men and warriors gathered outside, checking weapons, bows, and javelins. They knew this gathering was not merely a festival. It was an opportunity to train, to awaken national spirit, to prepare for upcoming challenges. Women, accustomed to caring for families, now also became vital supporters, carrying water, food, and tending to the wounded during simulated training exercises where children were taught how to run, hide, and evade spears. When the war drums sounded, everyone paused, listening to the rustle of the wind through the forest. That sound was a reminder of ancestors, of fallen warriors, of the stories of the past still recounted by the fire. The festival leader's voice rang out. We gather today not just to celebrate. We gather to remember that freedom, life, and honor must be protected. We are heirs of these mountains, and we will not forget anyone who fought for us. Those words sent a surge of energy through the valley, causing the listeners to rise, hands gripping spears, eyes blazing. Then the ritual began. Tribal leaders took turns presenting offerings at the altar, kissing the stone and silently praying to Depur and Prende. Smoke rose from the offerings, mingling with the mist, forming a hazy screen that many believed was the presence of the gods. Prayers mingled with drum beats, horns, and the villagers' cheers. Some elders wept, remembering loved ones lost in previous conflicts, while children gazed skyward, eyes sparkling with hope. When the offering ceremony concluded, the tribes did not immediately depart. They paraded around the valley, each family carrying flags, symbols, and trophies representing past battles. It was a strong reminder. They had survived, they were united, and they were ready to defend their homeland. Meanwhile, young warriors were trained by veterans, learning how to organize formations, coordinate tactics, and, most importantly, that spirit and willpower mattered more than weapons. One of the highlights of the festival was a mock warfare competition. Teams of youth battled each other, using wooden swords, bamboo shields, and basic combat techniques. Every strike was closely observed by the leaders, not only for training, but also to impart values, courage, discipline, and loyalty to the community. Families attending were allowed to watch, encouraging their children, forging a strong link between generations, from elders to adults to children. As dusk fell, the Dardania Valley remained aglow with the light of campfires. The scent of roasted meat, honey, and barley filled the air, yet did not diminish the solemnity of the festival. Families gathered together, sharing food, recounting stories of ancestors and battles against invaders. Each story reminded them that the true strength of the community lay not in the number of weapons, but in spirit and indomitable will. In the darkness, as the moon rose high, everyone looked to the sky, imagining the gods watching, blessing the crops, victories, and life. And though the festival ended, its spirit did not fade. It became a thread linking generations, a reminder that no matter how time passes, no matter how powerful an empire might be, values, faith, and unity will endure, stronger than any sword. In the following days, the Dardania tribes returned home, carrying lessons, spirit, and determination to protect their homeland. The festival was not only a cultural event, but a survival strategy, a way for the community to maintain willpower and strength, ensuring that no enemy could ever make them bow. And from year to year, the story of the Dardania Valley, of the gods, and of the courage of the Urian people continued to be told, not only in villages, but in the hearts of every warrior, every family, and every child, who would one day become leaders, passing on the flame of history and the spirit of freedom. When night fell over the Dardania Valley, the atmosphere became more vibrant than ever. Sacred torches illuminated every path, forming flickering streams of light in the darkness. The pounding of drums echoed, blending with the footsteps of hundreds of young warriors ready to enter the trials. The wooden swords were meticulously sharpened. Javelins gleamed in the firelight, serving not only as weapons, but also as symbols of courage, honor, and loyalty to the community. Cheers, shouts, and challenges rang out, shaking the mountains and awakening the spirits of ancestors to the rhythm of the drums. At the center of the festival, where the sacred fire blazed, the priestesses stood solemnly, holding torches, their eyes following every movement of the warriors. Every swing of a spear, every sprint was observed like a ritual, as if the gods were witnessing the bravery and spirit of the Dardania people. Young girls, dressed in white cloaks trimmed with gold, carefully arranged wreaths, occasionally tossing incense into the fire to ensure it burned continuously, carrying prayers and blessings to every village. The harmonious coordination across generations made the festival a timeless event. Elders taught children the values of courage, loyalty, and unity, while the youth displayed physical strength and dexterity, preparing for the real challenges of life. The games began with simple competitions: obstacle races, javelin throws, tug of war, and wrestling. But every challenge held ceremonial significance. They tested not only strength, but also willpower, wisdom, and perseverance. Each warrior entered the arena knowing that failure was not shameful, but giving up or losing respect for the community was. The sounds of clashing wooden swords, leaps, laughter, and cheering formed a vibrant symphony, reminding everyone of the harmony between strength, intellect, and spirit. More advanced competitions were held for adult warriors, simulated team battles, horse races, and even intellectual challenges. Each tribe sent representatives, and victories were not only personal pride, but also the honor of the entire tribe. When a warrior defeated an opponent, cheers erupted, and small flames were added to the sacred fire, as if courage and strength were being absorbed into the soul of Dardania. Every detail, from the arrangement of the altar, the firelight, to the drums and horns, carried meaning, linking humans with the divine and nature. Alongside the games, creative contests took place. Blacksmiths showcased their skills in crafting weapons and armor, potters made bowls and plates adorned with tribal symbols, and young artists performed dances and songs to honor the gods and preserve cultural traditions. These creations were not merely for entertainment, but also lessons in skill, imagination, and patience, essential qualities for surviving and thriving in the harsh environment of the Dardania Mountains. The physical and creative competitions lasted all day, and as dusk fell, the festival entered its most important ceremonial phase, the ritual of honoring. Outstanding warriors were recognized by the leaders and elders, receiving wreaths, decorated weapons, and blessings from the priestesses. This moment was not only personal acknowledgement, but also a testament to unity and faith in the power of the community. Everyone sang together, forming a chorus that echoed throughout the valley, making the mountains come alive and the sky feel closer to the people. The sacred night continued with music and dance. Dancers moved in circles around the fire, their feet stamping in rhythm with the drums, as if connecting heaven and earth, past and present. The sounds of wooden flutes, stringed instruments made from goat bones, and voices of all ages merged, creating a sacred and energetic space. Children imitated the movements of the elder dancers, ensuring that the tradition was passed down vividly and sustainably. Families also competed in offering gifts to the sacred fire. Sheep, goats, or doves were carefully selected, and milk, honey, wheat, and wine were arranged. Each offering carried sacred meaning, an act of gratitude and prayer, while reinforcing the bond between the tribe, the gods, and the ancestors. As blood and incense spread, everyone felt that life and fertility were not only personal responsibilities, but obligations to the community and the land. As the night deepened, the games continued in the form of intellectual and spiritual challenges, riddles, storytelling contests, and tactical combat exercises. Winners were honored before the community, and everyone, including rival leaders, recognized that true strength was not only in muscle, but also in intelligence, courage, and cooperation. The sacred fire continued to blaze, its light guiding young souls, reminding them that Dardania existed through unity and faith. When the festival ended, portions of the sacred fire were distributed to each family to carry back to distant valleys, ensuring that the flame, a symbol of life, courage, and unity, continued to burn in every village. Each family, from elders and warriors to children, carried pride, memories, and a vow to protect Dardania's heritage. The festival was not only a celebration but a living ritual, proving that tradition, spirit, and faith could transcend time, connecting humans with the divine, with ancestors, and with each other, so that anyone stepping into the Dardania Valley would understand that they were part of something greater than themselves. As dawn poured its first rays over the wide fields at the foot of the sacred hill, the air seemed to resonate with the heartbeat of Dardania. The leaders gathered their warriors in orderly ranks, each pair of eyes shining with determination, sunlight reflecting off bronze armor, creating a sparkling sea amidst the morning mist. The drums sounded first slowly and steadily, then gradually quickening, their rhythm driving the steps and spirit of everyone, reminding them that these were not mere games. This was a ritual connecting humans with the divine, past with present, strength with honor. The torch was raised high by the high priest, its flame flickering in the early mist, and the opening declaration in the name of Enge, the god of thunder and bravery, echoed across the valley, as if sending a message from the heavens. Prove your courage and resilience. The first contest was purely a test of strength, but it carried a lesson in perseverance. Men wrestled on the grass, bodies oiled, muscles gleaming under the sun, hands slipping yet spirits steadfast. The victor was not the strongest, but the one most persistent, standing firm the longest on his feet. Each collision, each roll on the grass carried a story of effort, spirit, and mutual respect. As the warriors breathed in the scent of earth, grass, and the distant sacred fire, they understood that true strength was not only in muscles, but in the bond of loyalty and faith in the tribe. Next came the javelin contest, where hunters tested their precision and power. Wooden targets carved with wolf heads, symbols of power and freedom, became the aim. The farthest, most accurate throw brought not only material rewards, smoked meat, silver, and sometimes deep red Urian wine, but also the admiration of all, especially the maidens gathered on the high steps. Eyes wide and attentive followed each raised arm, each twist of the body, as if each victory was a bridge between strength and affection, between reality and myth. Soon after, the sound of hooves signaled the horse race. Young men guided their horses along winding, uneven trails, wheels kicking up sparkling dust in the sunlight. Cheers echoed across the fields, for the Dardanians believed the gods rode alongside them, guiding the fastest horses to victory. Each fall, each collision was handled with respect, reminding everyone that life, whether human or horse, was precious, and every victory must be accompanied by reverence. As the afternoon light softened, the games shifted to tests of spirit and artistry. Poets and musicians stepped forward, carrying the deep rhythm of goat-skin drums, wooden flutes, and spiraled melodies intricately carved from bone. Women harmonized their voices, hands swaying to the drum beat, creating a vibrant symphony between earth and sky. Songs told of heroes who challenged Macedonian kings, hunters who tamed wolves, and lovers who braved dangers to be together. The music was not merely sound, it was living memory, a lesson in courage, faith, and tradition. Each verse, each note, each gesture wove a cultural tapestry where past and present merged as one. The fire circle dance began as the sun fully set. Dancers moved in a circle, their feet stamping the ground as if connecting the heart of Dardania to the rhythm of the universe. The thunder dance, led by warriors wearing wolf skins, mimicked storms, spears clashing, torches spinning, sparks flying into the sky, invoking the god of war and thunder. To outsiders, it might appear as battle, but to the Dardanians, it was a vow to protect their land, a display of loyalty and devotion, a sacred connection between humans and the divine. At midnight, the entire field became a massive circle. Thousands of people, from warriors to children, moved as one living entity, blending with the fire, drum beats, flute music, and singing. Young couples, meeting for the first time in the dance, exchanged glances, gestures, and unspoken promises, reminding all that love was also part of the ritual, a link between generations and tradition. Children scattered flowers, mountain herbs, and smoke from the sacred fire into the air, creating a lively scene as if the mountains, humans, and gods danced together. When the dance ended, everyone fell silent, leaving only the crackling of the sacred fire. Priestesses stepped forward, holding bowls of milk and honey, pouring them onto the ground as prayers for the harvest and fertility. Every seed, lamb, and drop of rain was tied to the tribe's vow and loyalty to the divine. Young couples received blessings, red threads wrapped around their wrists as protective symbols, reminding them that love and life were the foundation of the Dardanian community. As dawn appeared once more, the festival gradually drew to a close, but the spirit and heartbeat of Dardania still resonated. The games, dances, songs, and offerings were not merely activities or rituals. They were proof of unity, courage, wisdom, and love that this people held for one another and for their sacred land. Every fire, every drumbeat, and every step in the dance served as a reminder that, though time passes, the strength and soul of Dardania would live on in memory, tradition, and in the hearts of all who participated. As the first rays of dawn shone over the peaks of Dardania, a thin mist enveloped the valley, emphasizing the mystical and sacred nature of the final moment of the festival. The sacred fire, which had burned for many days, now became the centerpiece of the closing ritual. Sparks flickered and danced in the morning mist, weaving invisible threads connecting past, present, and future. The Dardanians gathered around, dressed in traditional attire, eyes filled with reverence, knowing that this moment was not merely an ending, but also a pledge of life, loyalty, and sacred tradition. The elders, cloaked in wolf-lined robes with gleaming bronze clasps, stood around the high priestess, who held a staff carved with spirals, a symbol of eternity, raised high to commence the ritual. The high priestess began by chanting ancient prayers, her words echoing through the valleys like a bridge between humans and the divine. She gave thanks to Dapur, the sky god, for strength and protection, to Aang, the god of thunder and bravery, for uniting the tribes, and to Prene, the goddess of love and fertility, for blessing life. Each of her words formed a bridge between the earthly and the divine, reminding everyone that the sacred fire was not merely fire, but the soul of Dardania, containing the history, tradition, and spirit of the people. A gentle wind blew through the mountain ridges, as if responding to the prayers, creating a harmonious symphony between nature and humanity. As the ritual began, the high priestess used flames from the central fire to light the clay lamps and torches brought by each tribe. One by one, each person stepped forward, hands trembling but full of sincerity, receiving the sacred light while chanting in unison. The chorus of thousands of voices resonated across the valley, blending with the crackle of the fire, creating a vibrant music imbued with faith and reverence for the divine. The light of thousands of small flames spread across the hillsides, sparkling like stars fallen to the earth, reminding everyone that the power of the fire lay not only in its brightness, but in its ability to connect every Dardanian heart. Children, the future stewards of Dardania, also participated in the final ritual. They carried baskets of grains, seeds, and wildflowers, scattering them into the wind, an act both joyous and sacred. The Dardanians believed that the seeds carried by the wind would find fertile ground, ensuring a bountiful harvest, and that the innocence of the children would please the gods. Meanwhile, the warriors washed their hands in spring water, cleansing the blood of past contests and preparing for peace. These gestures were not mere hygiene, they were acts of respect for the divine, a vow that strength should only be used to protect and preserve peace. The priestesses raised their hands to the sky, chanting prayers for Dapatur, the sky god, to bless the land with rain. When a gentle breeze blew or clouds gathered over the mountain peaks, everyone cheered, believing that the gods had accepted their offerings and prayers. The atmosphere was filled with sacredness, yet also with joy and hope, for fertility, harvest, and life were not indulgences, but proofs of harmony between humans, land, and the divine. Every heartbeat, every stalk of wheat, every newborn child was part of the eternal circle, reminding everyone of their duties and rights toward the land and community. As the sun began to rise above the mountains, the ritual reached its climax. The high priestess approached the sacred fire surrounded by tribal elders. She raised her staff and declared that the fire must now return to the people. Each tribe, each family carried lamps and torches back to their homes, their light illuminating the winding mountain paths like rivers of fire connecting the valleys. Every step, every flame carried prayers, blessings, and the heartbeat of the entire people. When the central fire was allowed to die out, the priestesses covered the ashes with earth and flowers, sealing them beneath stones carved with ancient runes. The ashes were not only the conclusion of the festival, but a symbol of eternity, preserving the soul of Dardania within the earth. Tears appeared on the faces of the people, not from loss, but from the sacredness of the moment. They wept, knowing the fire had spread throughout homes, families, and the heart of each person. Before leaving, the poets sang one final song, slow, haunting, and profound, recounting the eternal cycle of life, strength, love, and unity. Children laughed, the oxen were tethered, and each tribe began its journey home. The final smoke drifted upward, merging with the mountain air, leaving behind tranquility. Yet beneath this stillness, the sacred fire continued to burn, alive in every heart, reminding all that Dardania was not merely a land, but a unified, immortal, and vibrant soul. On the journey home, each family carried a portion of the sacred light, a reminder that the festival did not occur just once, but lived on through each generation. The scattered seeds would sprout, the songs and dances would be passed down, and the fire, though extinguished in daylight, would live on in the minds of the Dardanians. This ending, paradoxically, was a new beginning. Life was reborn, traditions reinforced, and faith in the gods and communal strength grew ever stronger. It was the moment Dardania realized that their power lay not only in muscle or weaponry, but in unity, love, and reverence for life, values that would keep the sacred fire burning forever, no matter how time passed.